An admirer of Ted Bundy, the prolific serial killer in the 1970s who was executed in 1989, Israel Keyes did everything he could to emulate his idol, targeting total strangers, avoiding anyone he had any possible connection to, traveling hundreds of miles to target random victims in secluded parks and other remote locations. But he was eventually caught because he broke all his own rules. After confessing to as many as 12 murders, Israel Keyes was asked why he did it. He replied, "Why not?" His motivation was pleasure, said Monique Dahl, an Anchorage homicide detective who worked on the case. Israel Keyes didn't kidnap and kill people because he was crazy, she told a news conference. He didn't kidnap and kill people because his deity told him to, or because he had a bad childhood. Israel Keyes did this because he got an immense amount of enjoyment out of it, much like an addict gets an immense amount of enjoyment out of drugs. FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin said he liked what he was doing. He talked about the rush he got out of it, the adrenaline and kind of the high from it. In a way, he was an addict, and he was addicted to the feeling that he got when he was doing this. However, Keyes was very different from his hero. Bundy went after a very specific victim, typically a young white woman who had long, straight hair parted down the middle. Keyes had no victim type. He would go after both men and women. He didn't care about ethnicity. Most serial killers, when they first start to kill, go after a victim they think won't be missed people from vulnerable populations like sex workers and runaways. But Keyes would take people alone and in pairs, and he would take them in broad daylight from very public places. He liked to go people hunting in the daylight in national parks, campgrounds, lakes, and beaches. He told investigators he would also hunt for victims in cemeteries because nobody ever questions a person on their own in a cemetery. But then he would also take people in the dead of night from their own bedrooms in well-off suburbs where such heinous crimes would normally be unthinkable. Born in Richmond, Utah in 1978, Israel Keyes was the second of 10 siblings. The family was religious and patriotic. His elder sister was called America. After leaving the Mormon faith, the Keyes family settled in Colville, Washington, where they attended several different branches of the Christian Identity Church. Some followers of Christian identity theology believe white people of Western European origin are the true descendants of biblical Israelites. They promote racist beliefs and predict an apocalyptic race war that will be engineered by the Jews. All of the Keyes children were delivered as home births, and they never saw a doctor. They were home taught, and none of them ever went to school. For their first 7 years in Washington state, they lived in a tent on a mountainside, while their father built them a cabin by hand. It did not have electricity or running water. As the oldest boy, Israel was taught how to kill and dress game to feed the family, while the father was either working down the mountain or out in the woods praying for hours on end. Israel was reportedly friends with Chevy and Cheney Kehoe, noted white supremacists who committed a number of high-profile crimes. In 1998, the Kehoe brothers got into a shootout with Ohio State troopers. Chevy was later sentenced to life in prison for the murders of a gun dealer, his wife, and her child. In 2014, Cheney and Father Kirby Kehoe would join him in prison on weapons charges. Eventually, Keyes would reject his family's religious inclinations, along with the teachings of the Christian Identity Church. When he told his parents that he was an atheist, they kicked him out, and his siblings were told never to talk to him again. Later, he would have a child with a Native American woman and live on the Maca reservation, where he worked for the tribal authority. Nevertheless, he admitted to harboring a lifelong fantasy of killing a police officer, which he attributed to his white supremacist roots. From an early age, he had all the makings of a serial killer. By the age of 10, he was breaking and entering, stealing guns and setting fires. By 14, he was torturing and killing household pets. At 16, he raped a teenager. He managed to lure the girl away from her friends. He said he'd intended to kill her, but in the end, he let her go. It is thought he committed his first murders as a teenager near his home in Colville. 2 teenage girls were killed in 2 separate incidents, along with one of the girls' mothers, but nothing was proved. He joined the military at 20, though he did not have a birth certificate or a social security number. He served in the U.S. Army from 1998 until 2000, but quit so that he could travel freely and commit murder. During his time in the Army, he said he did not kill, but admitted to 2 rapes, one while he was stationed in Egypt and another on leave in Israel. After leaving the service, he worked as a handyman, paying for his travel with burglary and by robbing banks. In 2007, he moved to Anchorage, Alaska with his girlfriend and their daughter. There he set up a construction business, but the desire to murder was too much for him. He kept what he called murder kits near his home in Anchorage and in New York State, where he had a rundown cabin on 10 acres of land. The one found in Alaska included a shovel, plastic bags, and bottles of Drano, which he told authorities would speed up the decomposition of bodies. The murder kit found in upstate New York contained weapon parts, a silencer, ligatures, ammunition, and garbage bags. Keyes said other murder kits were hidden in Washington State, Wyoming, Texas, and somewhere in the Southwest, possibly Arizona. There was also one in Vermont, which he had hidden there 2 years before he committed a double murder near to its hiding place. Despite this meticulous planning, he wanted to kill so much that the urge sometimes got the better of him. In the spring of 2011, he targeted 2 people in an Anchorage park to try out a silencer he had put on a rifle that he would later use in Vermont. However, a police officer arrived and told the intended victims the park was closed. Keyes later told investigators that he almost pulled the trigger on all 3, but then another officer arrived. That could have got ugly, Keyes said in a recorded interview. Fortunately for the cop guy, his backup showed up. Generally, he said, he did not like shooting people. He preferred strangling them so that he could savor their life slowly ebbing away. On the spur of the moment, on the 1st of February 2012, he kidnapped 18-year-old barista Samantha Koenig in Anchorage. CCTV footage showed him approaching her kiosk as she was closing up at around 8 p.m. and ordering an Americano. While she was making it, he pulled a gun. He climbed into the kiosk and bound her hands behind her back with zip ties before leading her out. She had not pushed the panic button because he told her that he would let her go if her parents paid a ransom. This was never his intention. Her family reported her missing the following morning, but the police did nothing. She had only been working there for a couple of weeks. They thought that she was a teenage girl who probably came from a rough background, a broken home, and had a history with drugs. She had most likely made off with the days taking from the register, a couple of $100 maybe, and she was out partying. She'd come back when she felt like it. This was not the case at all. The truth was far more brutal. The FBI reckoned that Koenig had put up a fight. She had broken away at some point, and Keyes chased her, tackling her to bring her to the ground. Pointing his gun at her, he said she should not do anything to make him kill her. More video footage showed him forcing her into the back of his 2004 Chevrolet Silverado in the parking lot of Home Depot. The police drew up a list of 750 white trucks of the same make in the area, but the license plate, toolboxes, and a ladder rack he usually carried had been removed before the abduction. They were reinstalled afterwards, effectively disguising the vehicle. Samantha was sexually assaulted and strangled. Her body was left in a cold shed for 2 weeks, while her killer went on a cruise. When he returned, he posed her body and sewed her eyes open with fishing line to make it look like she was still alive. Then he photographed her alongside a newspaper dated the 13th of February, 12 days after the abduction. The FBI had to call in an expert to determine whether she was dead or alive. On the back of the photograph, he wrote a ransom note demanding $30,000 from her family. He then sent a text to her boyfriend from her cell phone, telling him where to find the note in a nearby park. Otherwise, the batteries were removed from the cell phone, so it could not be traced. While maintaining the fiction that he was holding her hostage for ransom, he dismembered her body and dropped it in a frozen lake north of Anchorage, after cutting a hole through the ice with a chainsaw. The next mistake he made was using her debit card on a trip to the southwestern U.S. His rental car was caught on video when he used it at an ATM in Texas. When he was stopped for speeding, federal agents were already on his trail, and he was arrested. Extradited back to Alaska, he admitted a series of burglaries, bank robberies, and murders, though he fell silent when his name was leaked to the press. The authorities had difficulty identifying the murder victims, as Keyes rarely knew their names. He was suspected of kidnapping mothers and children from a shopping mall in Boca Raton, Florida, in 3 separate incidents. The first 2 times he shot mother and child and left their bodies in their vehicles. The third time he let them go unharmed after several hours. Though he was wearing a mask, the mother glimpsed his face, and he answered to the same general description as Keyes. He might also have murdered a woman believed to be Deborah Feldman in April 2009 in New Jersey and buried her near Tupper Lake, New York. He also admitted to a number of bank robberies in New York and Texas and was a suspect in the murder of Jimmy Tidwell, an electrician who disappeared near Longview, Texas on the 15th of February 2012. During a bank robbery the following day in Ozell, Texas, about 170 miles from Longview, the culprit, believed to be Keyes, wore a white hard hat similar to Tidwell's. The FBI say he also burgled homes and committed arson. The victims of the double murder he admitted to in Vermont were identified as William and Lorraine Currier, a middle-aged couple who lived in the village of Essex. He flew from Anchorage to Chicago and then drove 1,000 miles to their home. He chose it because it had an attached garage where he could hide his car. There was no evidence of children or a dog, and he was familiar with that style of house and knew where the master bedroom was. He broke into their bedroom, bound the couple with zip ties, forced them into their vehicle, and drove them to an abandoned farmhouse. There he shot William and sexually assaulted and strangled Lorraine. The house has since been torn down, but their bodies were never found. However, Samantha Koenig's body parts were recovered from the lake in Alaska. Having spent much of his life living under the radar, Keyes became one of those rare creatures, a serial killer who was never convicted of murder. But he still paid the ultimate price. He slashed his wrists and strangled himself with a bedsheet in jail while awaiting trial. With no one to try, the case had to be dropped.